The division in Canada has been crazy. And this is not something that is new to any of you, and nothing that's new to any of us. But it is something that is starting to be discussed a little bit more often. And one thing we're going to look into and dig deeper into today is Poilievre's interview when he addresses these things directly. This is an interview we've likely already seen already, but we're going to pull out these 2 minutes and then pull out the points that he touches on and go more in depth on those things. Because it is actually nuts how in 9 years, the division has grown so much from being Main Street all the way up to the highest points of our offices in this country. Without any further delay, let's get right into it. This is Pierre Poilievre being asked about the special representatives that have been appointed to address anti-Semitism and Islamophobia within the country. And he turns around with this answer and says, what have they done to prevent these things?
Liberal government, they can make the argument, well, we've never invested more. They pay for a special representative on Islamophobia. They pay for a special representative against anti-Semitism, right?
Wow, what has that done? Have these special representatives been out in the street shutting down these riots? What, every time there's a problem, Justin Trudeau creates a new bureaucracy. Creates a new high-paid position for someone with a corner office making $250,000 of taxpayers' money, and the problem gets worse. Spending more money on these problems is not the solution.
So you become prime minister. People like Amira El-Gawabi and Deborah Lyons lose their posts?
I think these posts are useless. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I don't think they do anything. And I also think we have to stop dividing people by race, ethnicity, religion. I think all racism is bad. I'm against every form of racism. And I also think we should treat people like individuals. And let's get back to Martin Luther King. Judge people by the content of their character rather than the color of their skin. Mm-hmm. There's never been more racism and racial tension than now after 9 years of Trudeau. 250% increase in police-reported hate crimes under Justin Trudeau. Why? Well, one, he allows the criminals out on the street. Two, this toxic wokeism deliberately divides our people into different racial segments and then turns them at war against each other. By the way, we're seeing it happen now in the Liberal Party, where Jewish Liberal MPs are now fighting with Muslim Liberal MPs, where Hindu Liberal MPs are fighting with Sikh Liberal MPs. We didn't have these problems before.
And he's spot on. We didn't have these problems before. And just to allude and talk about the references he brought up there with Sikh Liberal MPs fighting with Hindu Liberal MPs, is he talking about this situation here? Liberal MP accuses fellow caucus member of threatening him in the House of Commons, which brought up an issue where he brought forward in the House of Commons, where he attempted to get unanimous consent from the House on a motion to condemn the 1984 anti-Sikh riots in India as genocide. And he brought that up, and he got sworn at and threatened by his colleague in the House of Commons. This happened. And then we also talk about MP Anthony Housefather, who is Jewish, speaking out against anti-Semitism was becoming an issue within the party because Muslim MPs had issue with that or taking issue with his pro-Israel approach. It is actually crazy to see the Main Street issues make its way all the way up to the top offices in our nation. And I couldn't agree more with what Poilievre is saying here, which most Canadians would agree with. All racism is bad. All crime is bad. Let's get back to what makes Canadians Canadian, and let's form a unity underneath our country's banner. Not bringing in our problems from other countries and bringing it here and then starting wars here on Canadian soil. No, we need to come together, form together as one unit, and leave our problems behind. As he said later in that video, which I cut off there, talked about that's exactly what his wife did coming from Venezuela. Left her problems in Venezuela at home, came to Canada, and started a new life in Canada as a Canadian. That is what is so important and what is missing right now in our politics, in our cultural fabric here in Canada. The thing that was brought up and discussed here at the start was these special representatives. One to combat anti-Semitism, the other is to combat Islamophobia. Deborah Lyons is the special envoy to fight against anti-Semitism. Then you have Amira El-Gawabi, who was appointed the special representative to combat Islamophobia. Well, who is Deborah Lyons? Well, let's look at it. Deborah Lyons serves as Canada's special envoy in preserving Holocaust remembrance and combating anti-Semitism, meaning her primary role is to lead efforts to combat anti-Semitism within Canada and internationally, while also actively promoting Holocaust remembrance through education and advocacy initiatives. That's her role, pretty straight up and clear. We have Amir, who did a video, and I'll actually play the video here, describing what her role is, what her background is, and why she does what she does.
My name is Amira El-Gawabi, and I'm Canada's first ever special representative on combating Islamophobia. Now you might wonder, what does Islamophobia mean? It covers racism, stereotypes, bias, fear, acts of hostility, or violence aimed at individual Muslims or followers of the Islamic faith. Although Canada stands as one of the world's most inclusive countries, significant work is still ahead in countering Islamophobia and related forms of prejudice and discrimination. And this is where I fit in. As special representative, a large part of my responsibility is to offer advice and guidance to the federal government on how to address the impacts of Islamophobia and protect human rights. A second part of my mandate is to foster public awareness about the remarkable contributions of our incredibly diverse communities who help enrich the fabric of our society every day.
So that is what her role, what she does. And they've been in these roles for quite some time. And for some reason, these things didn't stop. These roles are well-paid and well-funded roles. They make anywhere between $175,000 to $250,000 a year. And as Pierre was stating in that video, is what has funding these roles actually helped with? If they were to combat anti-Semitism, if they were to combat Islamophobia, why is it at an all-time high now? It's only gotten worse. It's only had more issues. And I always wondered, and I'm curious if you're thinking the same thing. Do these two work together? Do they actually come together to bridge the gap of differences? And there's some cases they do. They at least show a public perception that they're on the same page. And it was very interesting. They actually hopped on CTV with Vashi to discuss the fallout of what happened with October 7th last year. I'll show you Deborah's response, and then I'll show you Amira's response to what happened with October 7th.
But what we're seeing in 2023, and most certainly since October 7th, is a huge spike. And it is causing people to feel unsafe and not supported and insecure in their own communities and worried about their children going to school, as we've seen in Montreal and as I've been hearing as I travel across Canada. I also am very committed to this because I have lived and worked as a diplomat in countries where you could see the sliding back of democratic values, of openness, of justice, of support for rule of law. I see how quickly it happens. We cannot allow it to happen in Canada. And our Jewish community certainly doesn't want that to happen.
You know, Deborah's pretty clear in terms of how the Jewish community is feeling, not feeling safe, feeling unsure, feeling attacked, nervous of where they're going to get protested next, not knowing if they can send their kids to school. These are some very real issues that Jewish people are feeling in Canada, which is honestly super sad. That should never be the case in Canada. Anti-Semitism really shouldn't be a thing, and especially shouldn't be a thing in Canada. They came here to be protected from that. But here we are, afraid to send their kids to school, afraid to go to their place of worship, afraid to even vocalize that they're Jewish. That is where they're at. And it's so funny, in the exact same interview, Amir is asked the same question. And again, remember, this is a month separated from what happened with October 7th. Just keep that in mind as you will listen to her response.
This is certainly bringing up a lot of very painful memories for Muslims in Canada as well as Arabs and Palestinians who are also seeing almost the repeat of what we saw post 9/11, where our communities were brushed with one brush, that we had to prove our loyalty all over again, that we have to somehow try to justify why we want to participate, why people want to participate in peaceful demonstrations, to express themselves, which are charter rights and freedoms, and yet somehow there is this polarization in our society where waving a Palestinian flag or waving a keffiyeh, that these types of activities, which are protected rights, what Canadians, have fought for in preserving in this country, that somehow is being equated with hate. That's very troubling and very dangerous. And I think what we can all agree is that, of course, we stand against anti-Semitism, of course we stand against Islamophobia, and we have to stand for our inclusive values, but all while respecting our rights to express ourselves and to, share in this society in ways that allow us all to feel seen, feel heard, and respected.
We are facing similar levels of hate that we did post 9/11. That is the one thing that really stuck out to me out of that conversation. It's not like Hamas just jumped the border, killed a bunch and slaughtered a bunch of civilians, and now, we're all being painted with the same brush. Don't get it twisted. It was weird. It was weird what happened in Canada after October 7th. October 7th happened. We moved to October 8th, and people are in the streets flying Palestinian flags, waving their keffiyehs in the air, the things worn by those who murdered numerous citizens in Israel. So don't get it twisted. Again, the whole, we're going to play victim on this. No. People were openly in the streets of Toronto Montreal cheering this stuff on. And it's like, oh, this is just another level of hate we haven't seen since 9/11. It was just kind of wild to see her play the victim in this case. And again, going back to what started this episode off, Pierre Poilievre calling these roles out. If this is what they're going in and doing and perpetuating in the media, God only knows what they're doing behind closed doors. And as he said, the money put into these special representatives hasn't stopped anti-Semitism, hasn't stopped people getting in the streets and burning the Canadian flag, hasn't stopped the constant abuse of Jews within Canada. I'm not saying it hasn't happened where Jewish people may have been violent towards Muslims, but it's very, very much in the minority compared to what we're seeing from the other side. And it just brings it back to this really shouldn't even be the conversation. Special representatives to look out for the special interests of specific group in this country. It really shouldn't be about that. It really should be about the Canadian identity, how we can live in unity together and make this country the best thing it can be. Poilievre laid it out very nicely. The division between race, religion, gender has come so quickly with this government, been so potent. And what has spending this money done? Trudeau's been so clear that he wants to fight these issues, wants to bring people together, unity, yet he's only divided Canadians more and more. So much so, it is so divided that it's even dividing in his own party along these cultural lines. That should be of concern to him. That should be of concern to the Liberals. When you have people in the House of Commons threatening each other over their cultural ideologies, religious ideologies, that's a problem. That should not be an issue here in our parliament. Canadian parliament, we're fighting over Sikh and Hindus. In our parliament, we're fighting over Jewish and Muslims. People come to Canada for peace. People come to Canada to get away from all those issues from across the world. And we've actually highlighted and made it worse here. And it's interesting how it's perpetuated. I remember being in school, art school, 4 years, talking about these very issues. But I remember being excited knowing that I get to leave university and go into the real world where people aren't that crazy. We were talking about all these very issues, gender ideology, the redefinition of racism, these things. And I thought people were absolutely nuts. And they were. Conversations were wacky. And then it permeated throughout our culture in Canada. And then was set up ablaze with Trudeau coming into power and using that as a crutch to gain and maintain power, further dividing the people. So that he can come out and say, yeah, we are dropping $250,000 on this special representative. We're dropping $250,000 on this special representative. Yet we have seen such a spike and increase in ideological violence in our streets that these special representatives have not been able to keep from happening. I haven't seen Amir come out condemning the Montreal riots. She just rather gaslight you, saying that it had nothing to do with the pro-Palestinian cause. Won't condemn these riots, won't condemn the violence that has been taking place on behalf of pro-Hamas supporters, pro-Palestinian supporters. Won't condemn it, but instead will do what Justin Trudeau does and gaslight Canadians, saying it's not really the issue. That really isn't what happened. They just burned effigies of Netanyahu in the streets. They just went and vandalized everything while waving Palestinian flags. What are we supposed to think? And this is where our money is going to. And I'm happy to see that Pierre Poilievre is going to end that because clearly they are not effective in their roles. They only perpetuate more hatred and division. So I think we're better off eliminating these special representative roles and getting back to what makes Canadians Canadian. So have yourself a good day. I'm out.